Good morning. A little shorter than my previous speaker. Morning, everyone. I want to take a little bit of a different angle, I think, from some of the other speakers we've heard over the last day and focus a little bit more on the role of downstream food companies. And we'll share a little bit about how EDF particularly supports these companies in driving methane reductions and action. Since you'll be hearing from a few of my colleagues, including myself today, I'll just provide a little bit of background on our organization and what we do. So at EDF, our aim is to ensure a vital earth for everyone. We do that by leveraging our organization's strengths to figure out the practical solutions to the most challenging environmental problems that we're facing today. And to do that, we bring together science, economics, partnerships, and advocacy. In my role in particular on EDF's business team, for me, that means leveraging all of these pieces to work with food companies in the beef sector to deliver the greatest impacts through their climate strategies. It's probably not a surprise to the folks in this room that driving the greatest impact through their climate strategies involves solving for the challenges we have with enteric methane. So to zoom out a little bit and consider what drives corporate action on methane, it's driven by many things: risk management, consumer and investor demand, maintaining business continuity, safeguarding long-term profitability, and ultimately underlying all of that is a really urgent need to build greater agricultural resilience, especially in a sector that we know, as folks have mentioned and alluded to, is already facing the effects of a changing climate through extreme weather, like heat waves and droughts. And globally, we're seeing alignment on and demand for addressing greater action in the food system, which also adds pressure to companies to act and be a part of that. So far, 155 countries have signed on to the Global Methane Pledge, which doesn't touch just agricultural methane, but certainly includes it. These countries are committing to reduce methane 30% by 2030, and covering over 50% of global anthropogenic emissions. So potential for very large impact that will require action of these companies and support for their value chains in making these transitions. At last year's COP, over $7 billion was pledged towards food systems climate action, indicating large interest and investment in this space. And we also heard yesterday from Global Methane Hub about their enteric accelerator. So we're seeing big steps towards supporting food systems change. And on the consumer front, in a survey of over 350,000 consumers, Gen Z and millennial customers reported that when they're 27% more likely to make a purchase when the brand they're purchasing from indicates that they are driving impact towards the planet. Additionally, forecasting experts are estimating that these two generations will surpass the buying power of baby boomers by around the year 2030. So addressing the demand for less climate impactful foods will be really imperative for business. So how are companies responding to these different types of pressures and needs for action? To oversimplify, many companies are setting targets, climate targets, science-based targets, and goals across different environmental issue areas. Our work at EDF involves not just helping companies to raise ambition, but also helping them figure out what they need to prioritize to meet that. In the case of companies with large amounts of beef in their value chains, addressing methane quickly rises to the surface of what they need to focus on if they're going to meet these climate goals. Of course, as we begin to assess what these priority areas are, we also start to realize what the barriers are. We have acknowledged already in a number of sessions this week that one of the biggest barriers for beef is not having highly effective solutions that are appropriate to grazing environments and that will work for ranchers. We also have challenges for these downstream companies in supply chain transparency and visibility. Having that connectivity to producers across their value chains is essential to actually implementing and is something that we need to also solve for. And related to that also come challenges around MMRV. So for these companies that are putting forward this climate ambition, recognizing the need to address methane, especially enteric methane, where we're finding all of these barriers we're coming up against, what can they do to address that and bring their value chain along as a part of the conversation. Through work like our recently released report, we highlight near-term opportunities for addressing livestock methane for both beef and dairy, but for this session, I'll focus specifically on the opportunities that we highlight for beef. We break this down into this framework of opportunities for folks to act, advocate, and advance, acknowledging that while oftentimes in the corporate space, we think of acting as only implementing solutions on the ground, when in reality, there's a lot that companies can be doing to support this more enabling environment that also touches on a lot of the pieces that folks have talked about this week. First, there are opportunities to act by implementing on the ground. Some elements of pasture management come into play with this that may influence methane, can be done nearer term, where it's appropriate to incorporate tannin-rich plants. Might not be on the highly effective side of solutions here, but when we're thinking of what we can consider and be deploying in the near term, we've talked about the appropriateness of feed additives and that this might be an opportunity more on the feedlot side for beef, much less so in grazing environments. But we're encouraging companies to start having these conversations across their value chains, as there are near-term opportunities like this that can be considered as safe and effective products come to market. On that note, on the policy advocacy side, there's much that companies can be doing as well to support a more enabling environment. This includes advocating in the different national markets that they're operating in for more efficient regulatory approval processes for safe and effective enteric products where it's needed, like in the US. Additionally, advocating for government support to cost share methane reducing practices that will support producers in uptake will be a really important enabler to adoption. And within our advanced pillar, which touches on a lot of what folks in this room have talked about this week, is the development of solutions that we need. And for companies where they can support innovative research that will enable products that offer co-benefits that appeal to producers and work for a range of systems, since we know that in beef systems, most of the methane is produced in grazing phases of life. And creative solutions for these systems are really needed and will change the game. Another topic that we've heard on this week is breeding programs and genetics as a really critical opportunity for reducing methane, and that could work across different system types. So for companies, working with conveners in this space to support these critical areas of research and work will be needed to bring forth the solutions that will really help us solve for this challenge. And really underlying all of this is a need to have ongoing and thoughtful conversations with suppliers and working to understand how this reasonably can be deployed across their value chains. These can't be conversations that happen in silos, and innovating new solutions that work for ranchers is going to be a really critical piece of this puzzle, and one that we need to continue expanding the dialogue on. So I'll close one point that is clear to me from this work and from the conversations that we're having this week, is remembering that action and progress don't just come in the form of on-the-ground implementation. That's where we want to get to. And we're in this unique moment now here where we're all here recognizing the importance of methane and addressing this issue, and where we can make sure that we're setting the stage so when we have solutions that we can be deploying on the ground, we're in the best possible position to do that and move things forward. And that's it for me. Thank you all.